Now let's go ahead and create an exploit. We are now using a CentOS 7 machine. The other machine that we'll be testing on is a Windows 10 machine. We have the latest operating system. We have the latest antivirus installed on that machine. What we have in our controlled environment is two machines. One will be the attacker machine and one will be the victim machine. The Windows 10 machine will be the victim machine, and this, the CentOS 7 machine, will be used as the attacker machine. Just as a disclaimer again, this exercise is being done in a controlled environment. You do not want to be taking Veil and using it on unsuspecting victims, because there are significant penalties and potential lawsuits against you if you are caught. This exercise right now is being done in a closed environment that we own both machines, and we are using this purely as a demonstration purpose only. So the first thing we need to do is go to the Veil directory and run Veil. You do not want to be using these exploits on any unsuspecting victims, as there are significant penalties for doing so. This is being done in a closed environment. So the first thing we want to do here is go to the Veil directory. We've already installed Metasploit. We've already installed Veil. Now we want to run the Veil program, and we do that by going to the Veil directory, which is cd veil-evasion. And within that directory, we're looking for the veil-evasion.py file here in green. Let's run that file, and then I'll explain that dashboard to you. Once we have that dashboard visible, let's run the program, and you'll see it shows up Veil Evasion 2.2.7. You'll see there are 51 payloads loaded here, so there are already payloads within Veil that we can use, and there are some available commands that are listed here as well. I'll go through those commands, but you can see 51 is written in green, and these payloads are already available for us. If we want to get information on a specific payload, we simply type in info and the number of the payload, and we will get information about that payload. The rating, how effective it is, how dangerous it is, etc. If I want to get a list of all the available payloads, I simply type in list. We'll do the list shortly, and then look through the list of payloads that are already available. There are a bunch of payloads available, so let's just go through some of them. You'll see they all have unique numbers next to them. We also have scripts or payloads written in Ruby. We have them in Python. We have PowerShell. We have even web server exploits and payloads that are listed here in 45, 46, 47, etc. We have the reverse TCP. We have PowerShell. We have injection payloads. You can play around with the different payloads to figure out what information each one has, how potent they are, etc. But for now, if you wanted any specific information on a payload, I can simply type in info and the name of that payload or the number of that payload. And as you can see, there are HTTP, HTTPS, reverse TCP, there's bind TCP. There are quite a few different payloads that you could be using. So let's go up and have a look what else there is. There's PyInstaller wrappers, there's Cold War wrappers. Again, you can find information on all these different types of payloads when you get an opportunity to do so. If I want the info on this particular reverse TCP payload, I can simply go and type in info and then type in the number, which here is, let's look at number 49. So once we type in 49 for this particular payload, we should see some options of what we can use to create that payload. Here we have the name, the language it's written in, the rating, normal rating here, the description of what it is, And there are some required options. As you can see, the current values in the middle column, which we would need to set for the payload to run correctly, because it'll compile that payload for us and create something that is quite random, that is going to bypass most antivirus solutions, which we'll then test on a Windows 10 machine shortly. Now let's go back to the list, and I want to look for the Python interpreter reverse TCP, which we'll be using here, and that number is 34. So to create the payload for that particular reverse TCP, we need to firstly note down the number 34, and we want to go back to the command line and type in info and that particular number. Once we type in info 34, it will then present the information about the payload for us and show us the options required to create the payload. So let's go in and type in info 34, and we will then be presented with a screen that will show us all the options for that particular payload. It will tell us the rating of the payload and also give us the required options to then create the payload correctly. Let's have a look at the info here, and as you can see, it does give us a number of required options. To use the payload, we simply type in use and then the number of this payload that you had noted down previously, which was 34. So we type in use 34, and it will then present the screen which now says the payload has been loaded. Now we see the reverse TCP listing here in the bottom section, and we now have to set the different options. So firstly, we want to set the L host, which will be the IP address of this machine which has Metasploit and Veil installed, this machine being the attacker machine. We want to run the file on the victim's machine and then open up the port back to this attacker's machine so we can take control of their machine without them knowing that we have installed a malware device on their machine. Now let's go ahead and type in set lhost, and let me get the IP address of this machine. We are using this in a closed environment, so it will be a local IP address within the network. As you can see, there's the compile to exe, which says yes, we have set lhost, and the IP address for this machine is 192.168.56.101. So we have the IP address for this machine. Veil, Metasploit have been installed, and once we set the lhost, we can then view the actual options again. And let's have a look at the options if lhost has been set. So we type in options here, and we look at the options. We see now the lhost has been set to the IP address of this machine, the attacker's machine. So lhost has been set. We're using the L port of the machine, which is 4444. We can change that port if we want to. I won't be changing it here, but just to understand, this is how we can change these settings. You simply type in set, you type in the name of the component you want to change, and then type in the value. Now to generate the payload, we type in generate. We need to create a base name for the output file, which is default is payload. We want to call this something like game. What we want to do is then create the executable file and then take the executable file on an USB device and take that to the Windows machine to show how it is able to bypass the antivirus solutions. So I simply type in game here, and once I press enter, it tells me how would you like to create your payload executable. I can use PyInstaller and a few other options here. I will just use one for now, keep it as the default. So we use PyInstaller, press 1, and press return or enter. And what will happen now is it will create the payload for us. Once the payload is done, it will give us a path name. I will go to the path name and then take the executable file from there and put it onto a USB device. Now this screen will take a short while to create the payload. It may require me pausing the video and then coming back shortly. But what we'll see here is some warnings. That's no problem. And it will go through and create the payload for us. And once the payload has been created, we will be presented with a screen that looks very similar to this, which now says your payload files have been generated. Don't get caught. Again, this is done in a closed environment. You don't want to be using it in an uncontrolled environment on an unsuspecting victim. There are huge penalties and you don't want to be going down that path. Use this for ethical means only. As you'll see here, the path name is listed as z:/root/veil evasion/dist/game.exe. So that's the encrypted file that Veil has created for us. We want to take this particular file, put it onto a USB device, and then take it to a Windows 10 machine with the latest antivirus software, and then install it on that machine, which we'll be doing in the next video. So this video has just been able to show how to use Veil to create a very simple payload using the options of the reverse TCP and also encrypting that file in a random way so we can then potentially infect the victim's machine, which we'll do in the next video. Again, this tutorial is being run in a controlled environment. A skilled hacker would be using email, or like we saw in the Mr. Robot TV show, hackers could potentially use it on a music CD that then the unsuspecting victim puts on their machine. Now let's get to the fun stuff of installing this game.exe file on our Windows 10 machine. So I have two machines here, two virtual machines. This CentOS 7 machine is the attacker machine where we created the payload with Veil. Now we're going to go to the Windows 10 machine, which is also a virtual machine, but also will be used as the victim machine. So let's go to the Windows 10 machine now, and I'll show you how we can install the payload here. Now, if I go to the Windows options, I want to look for the Windows Defender just to confirm what is available. So we have the default Windows Defender desktop application here. If I click on this, you will see that it is running and it is up to date. So with that in mind, let's just confirm that is the case. As you can see, real-time protection is on and virus and spyware definitions are up to date, which confirms that this machine is up to date with the latest antivirus. Now, what we want to do is then go ahead and download the game.exe file from our previous machine and load it up on this machine. If I had two physical machines, I would have copied the game.exe file on the CentOS 7 machine to a USB drive and then move the USB drive to this machine. Because we are running a virtual machine environment here, let's just confirm what version of Windows 10 is running here so you can actually see the settings on this particular machine, and then we'll go ahead and download the game.exe file. So within Windows 10, I just want to see what this PC settings are. So let's click on this and we will see the properties for this machine include that this is a Core i5 machine. So let's just confirm all the settings are correct. Here we have the Core i5. We have 1.46 gigabyte of installed RAM. It's a 64-bit operating system, Windows 10 Pro, and it's not a top-of-the-line spec machine, but it's working well. It's running Windows 10, and we can now go ahead and go to the other machine and get the executable file that we will then copy to this machine. Now I'll talk about a couple settings that we had created in the payload and then explain to you how we can detect that on this machine. So let's also get the IP address of this machine. So I want to go to the network settings, and we have two Ethernet connections here. One's Ethernet and one's called Ethernet 2. And what we do here is just check the IP addresses for the two different ones. We see this is the one connected to internet. This is the other Ethernet cable that we want to get the IP address for. This is the address 192.168.56.103. We also want to make sure the firewall is disabled for now, so that we can get the file working on this machine. So let's go ahead and check. Yes, the firewall is disabled. So now we can begin getting that game.exe file and moving it to this Windows 10 machine, and then check whether it is detected as malware or virus by Windows Defender. Let's go ahead and get the file from the other machine, and what I'll do is copy that to a virtual USB drive, and we will then make sure the USB is enabled on both machines. As we can see here, we've got a path listed here in green. What I want to do is copy this path, and then I want to copy the payload to, I'll just put a copy command in the beginning of this and copy it to the root directory, so we can then move it to the USB drive. So let's put in root here, which will then copy the file. So we have the game.exe file. If we look here, we will see the game.exe file listed here on the left hand side. And now we can download this, and if we download it, we can then set the path to the USB drive, the virtual USB drive, and it will then be available to us when we run the Windows 10 machine. So let's go ahead and go to this PC. We have USB 3 here. I'll move it to USB 3. Now that's copied. Once that's been copied, we can go back to the Windows 10 machine and make sure that it is enabled there. So all I did was download it to this USB drive, and that would have made it available on that drive. On the Windows 10 machine, if I go to the Explorer and let's have a look at that folder, if we can find that drive. If the drive is not visible, as we'll note here, the drive is not available. It means that I haven't mounted the USB drive. So let's go ahead and make sure that we mount the drives correctly. Let's go back to both the machines under shared folder settings. So let's go ahead and do that and make sure that we share the folders correctly on both machines. So once I click on this shared folder settings, we will see the shared folders here. And let me go to the other machine and do the same here and mount the proper folder correctly. And once we mount these, we'll be able to see that folder on both machines. So once we see the screen load up under shared folder settings, we click on machine folders, and here I can select the folder path, other, and folder name. Let's find the USB drive under this PC. Scroll down, here we have the drive, so I select that drive, make it read-only, auto-mount, and make permanent. Click OK, and click OK again, and I then need to go to the Windows 10 machine. Click on the little symbol on the right here, and select the folder path. Then go to this PC, select the USB drive, click OK, check all these again, click OK, and then click OK again. Now, if the drive is not visible, it's because this machine is being run in a virtual environment. We need to reboot the Windows 10 machine, and only after we reboot the machine will we be able to see that particular drive. Now, one thing I also want to let you know is when we created the payloads, we had set the encryption to no, and I'll show you the importance of that in a short while. But once we reboot this machine, we'll be able to copy the game.exe file across. So let's restart this machine, and once it's restarted, we'll be able to access that USB drive on both machines. We have copied the game.exe file already to that USB drive. Now, once Windows 10 is up, we'll be able to access that drive, then copy the game.exe file across, and see whether Windows Defender actually detects the malware. Now, let's go ahead and check that now. Here's Windows 10 running. Once this opens up, we'll be able to log in. Once logged in, we'll be able to browse to that particular folder. Again, it might take a short while depending on the processor speed you have, but it's not a very long wait. As we'll see now, Windows 10 will show up, the desktop will open up, and we'll be able to browse to that folder. Now, I mentioned the encryption, and you'll see why that is important. So here we have the Windows 10 machine. Let's go ahead and log in. Once logged in, we will go to this PC and browse to that folder. Let's go ahead and log into this machine, and we will go to that particular folder and make those changes to find the game.exe file. Let this load up, and once we're in, we will copy the game.exe file across. Again, it may take a short while. We're running on a virtual machine here, so it tends to take a little longer. The Windows Defender is up to date, and as you'll see, we haven't encrypted the payload. We will look at both options shortly. First, I want to show you what happens when we have the payload without any encryption. So let's go back to the folder, the Explorer here, and we browse to the folder to find that USB drive. Hopefully the shared drive appears this time, and once we see that folder, we'll be able to access the game.exe file. Here we go, and once that loads up, we will browse to the folder which has the USB drive. So I click on this PC, and within this PC we will start seeing the appropriate folders. As we'll see here, we have the I drive, which is now called E, and if I click on that, we will see the game.exe file within that folder. What I then want to do is copy that game.exe file to this machine. Let's go ahead and show you. When we go to the veil evasion again, let's just run this program. What we'll see is there are, within those options, when I go to use 34, we have something called the encryption, which is called use Furion. Now, within use Furion, you can see here we have marked it as no. That means encryption is turned off. Now, when a malware is not encrypted, chances are very high that the Windows Defender or any antivirus would know these signatures and then detect them very easily. So let's copy this to our Windows machine, and if I paste this, let's try and run this program. When I open this program, let me double click on it, and we should be prompted with a message saying something along the lines that this is a virus of some sort. If Windows Defender is up to date, we see here successfully because the file contains a virus or potentially unwanted software. That means Windows Defender, as we can see in the bottom right, malware has been detected. As we had not used the encryption, this was easily, very easily detected by Windows Defender on this Windows 10 machine. Now, a skilled hacker would not be using the payload without the encryption. A skilled hacker would be ensuring that the payload is run with a encryption mechanism in place. So what we've done here is just created a simple payload with the encryption off. Now we'll go ahead and create the payload again with the encryption on. So to put the encryption on, we'll copy this use Furion. Let's copy that, and we simply put in the option Y next to it, and that will give us the encryption on. So if I click on options again, we will see that the options, it says yes. I need to put in the IP address again. So we need to set the L host to the IP address we had previously, 192.168.56.101. Now we have all these settings. Under options, we will see that the architecture is 32. And let's have a look here. It says compile to exe. It has the L host, it has the L port, and it has use Furion as yes. Don't worry about 32-bit. 32-bit will work on a 64-bit machine. So we are good to go. And then we'll create the payload again. Now let's go ahead and generate the payload with encryption. So I simply type in generate here, and we go ahead and create the new payload. So generate and enter, and we will be presented with the screen again. This time we'll call the base name game encrypted, and actually let me change that to game encrypt. And what we'll do here is we'll run with 1 again, same process of getting the exe file so we can see the different results. I'll wait for this to create the payload, and then we'll go through the same process of copying it to the root folder, moving it to the USB drive, and then moving it to our Windows 10 machine. So I've exited Veil. Now we go to the folder which we copied previously, and we want to copy this to the root directory. Once that is in the root directory, we should see it appear on the left hand side here. If I just refresh, we'll see it's listed here. I want to copy or download it to the USB drive. Once that has downloaded, we need to go to our Windows 10 machine, and we will go to the USB drive again. Within that folder, we will see the game encrypt. We want to copy this to our documents folder, for example. And let's paste the file here. And once we've pasted it in, let's look at what happens in the next video when we attempt to run this particular file.